That creek had crossed my property for generations. It was natural, peaceful, and clearly marked on my land survey. I never had a problem with the HOA living beyond the ridge until one morning. I found heavy equipment beside my creek. By noon, 3 dump trucks had driven onto my property. They were carrying dirt, rocks, and construction material. Melissa Carter was standing there directing the workers herself. I walked over and asked her what she thought she was doing. Melissa told me the HOA was improving the creek. I asked who had given them permission to work on my land. She said the HOA board had approved the project. I reminded her that an HOA vote couldn't make my property theirs. I showed her exactly where my property line ran. She looked at the survey but refused to accept it. Then she told the workers to continue. That's when I knew they had no intention of stopping. The first truck lifted its bed and dumped everything into the creek. Soil and rocks crashed into the water. The natural flow immediately began slowing down, and Melissa stood there like she had just solved a problem. Within an hour, the creek looked completely different. The water was backing up behind the dirt piles. I warned Melissa that blocking a natural watercourse could create serious problems. She simply told me the HOA knew what it was doing. By the afternoon, they had built a massive dirt barrier. The creek could barely pass through the remaining channel. Melissa called it a drainage improvement project. I called it what it really was, unauthorized construction on my land. I didn't argue with them anymore. Instead, I documented every truck, every load, and every foot of construction. I photographed the water level before and after each load. I wanted a complete record of what they were doing. That night, heavy rain moved through the hills. By morning, the creek had risen far beyond its normal level. Water was spreading into areas that had never flooded before. The HOA's shortcut was becoming their biggest problem. By the next morning, the water had reached the neighborhood. Roads and low-lying yards were beginning to flood. Melissa finally understood why I had warned her. The creek wasn't just carrying water anymore. It was carrying the consequences of her decision. I stood beside my creek and stared at what the HOA had done. A mountain of dirt and rocks was blocking the water on my property. The HOA president acted like she had every right to be there, but she had no idea what was about to happen next. I asked her one simple question: who authorized this? She smiled and said the HOA had approved the project. I told her this creek crossed my private land. She laughed and said, "That won't matter for long." I pulled the survey from my truck and showed her the property boundary. The creek, the banks, and the surrounding land were clearly mine. She barely looked at the documents before dismissing them. That was her first mistake. The blockage was already changing the creek's natural flow. Water was spreading into areas that had never flooded before. I warned them to stop immediately. Instead, the HOA ordered another load of dirt. Then another truck arrived and dumped even more soil. The creek became narrower with every load. I knew this was no longer just a property dispute. They were interfering with a natural waterway without my permission. By afternoon, water had started spilling across my land. Fence posts were standing in several inches of muddy water. I documented everything before touching a single shovel. I wanted the evidence to speak for itself. The next morning, county officials arrived to inspect the creek. They measured the water level and examined the dirt barrier. The HOA president suddenly stopped looking so confident. For the first time, she realized the county was involved. The county engineer explained that the HOA could not simply fill the creek. Permits and environmental requirements had been ignored. The president tried blaming the workers, but the paperwork pointed directly back to the HOA. The county ordered the work to stop immediately. Every truck and worker had to leave my property. The HOA president stared at the notice in disbelief. But the biggest consequence had not even arrived yet. By the end of the day, the creek was finally being restored. The water began flowing naturally across my land again. The HOA had turned a simple mistake into a serious legal problem. And now, I was ready to find out exactly who ordered it.